Hello, and welcome back to another video. And today we will be reviewing the MCD 23 teams. And they're pretty crazy this time around. They're pretty cool and they're pretty balanced as well. So this is definitely going to be an interesting event. But other than that, if you like the video, make sure to like and maybe even subscribe. But other than that, let's get into it. First off, we have the blue Bullfrogs with Defect, Ignacio Blade, and Irish Potato. Now, this team could be very broken depending on what happens. This team sees the sorta kind of return of Ignacio Blade, who was originally meant to play in, I believe, Festive 22, but unfortunately had to sub out. So I don't know how much he knows about MCBC, and that was almost like 2 years ago as well, so probably not much, but still, he's a very mechanically skilled player, so he's still gonna probably do very well no matter what. Maybe not as good in team games and games like Split, but PvP and everything else, he'll do pretty solid. And he's just a mechanically strong player. So even though he's never played before, I don't think that'll be a problem for the most part. And then we have Defect, who is coming off of another loss, which is unfortunate for him because I'm pretty sure he's never won a finale before. But now, if he does make it, he won't lose with Generous again, at the very least. So the real question is, can he break the curse? Because the few times he has lost, he's lost to Rubixel. So hopefully he can win now, because Rubixel's not in this event, which I guess is a spoiler for later. Not really, but anyway, he's just an overall good strategist when it comes to games like Relic and Build Arena. Maybe not as strong in PvP games, although PvP games, in my opinion, can be a bit more shaky at times. But just overall not as strong in PvP games, and then just very solid at movement as well. He's definitely someone to look out for. In my opinion, he could potentially become an S tier, or at least in my eyes, because there's three of them to me, and he's definitely getting there very quickly. If he can do better in PvP, I would definitely consider it. And then we have the true wild card of this team, Irish, who has had very varying performances in MCBC. From ninth to last, I believe Irish has gone higher. I don't remember. But she's definitely a wild card player, and she can do very well depending on the team. And this could possibly be a team where that happens. She's very good at comms and overall knowing what not to do. And with defects knowledge, I think this team can just do very well overall in team games. But this team could be a bit more rocky in PvP, especially if Ignacio does not understand everything well enough. But otherwise, this is just a mechanically strong team in everything. Next up, we have the Red Raccoons with Slates, Jaden Dog, and LA Drim. I hope I'm saying that right. If I'm wrong, correct me in the comments, because I'm horrible with names. But anyway, this is a pretty all-rounded team, in my opinion. That's on the surface not very strong at PvP, at least at first glance. But anyway, first we have the newcomer Aladrim, who is someone who plays on the truly Bedrock SMP or server. I don't really know what it is. I haven't watched it. I believe it's a SMP, but I could be wrong. I don't actually know 100% sure because I've never watched it. But otherwise, they're just mainly a survival YouTuber slash streamer, which helps a lot mechanically in games, or at least knowledge wise, which will help in games like Build Arena and Relic, because those are a bit more like knowledge, like knowing what blocks and you need, what you can craft, and etc. But otherwise, it I don't know how good they will do in other games like Gauntlet or what's it called, Rift Race. It is on the same map again, which I'm in shambles about because I want a new map so bad. But anyway, so yeah. Also, PvP might be a bit rough, but otherwise, I think they can do very good. Like, depending on how well they train, they can still do very well. We've seen in the past newcomers who not seem that strong on paper do pretty well. But then we have Slates, who is another like mostly all around player. The only problem is Slate's a bit weaker in PvP compared to some of the other people, or at least stronger players in the event. But he's still like not too bad. And otherwise he's very like decent at movement games and like general comms as well. So it's just a pretty like all round player otherwise. And then we have Jaden, who again another all round player, at least to me. Their last event was pretty like okay, not super strong, but not super weak, and they're not really like super duper strong at anything or super weak. So yeah, this is just a very like all round team that's not the best at PvP, but the other games they can very well much dominate. So they're definitely gonna want to try and get Build Arena, Relic, and Rift Race maybe to like get played later because they can very well dominate those games. But otherwise, yeah. Next up, we have the Yellow Yetis with Ella, Pontyboy, and Akuf. Now, this team could potentially be a very strong team. Now, on paper, at least from last event, it does not look as strong. Ponty had a very unfortunate event where his team just didn't do very good in like most of the games, which was unfortunate, but it is what it is. He still did very well in Gauntlet and pretty decent in Rift Race as well. So he's coming back to this event with hopefully like a better performance than last time. And hopefully better like PvP games. Because those went really bad. But anyway. Then we have Ella, who also did like pretty solid. Not like super duper strong, but not super duper weak. Her team had like a very unfortunate time in like PvP games. So hopefully she can redeem herself from last time, because otherwise she did like pretty solid like overall in like all the other games. And also Spleef, but that's to be expected because Spleef is Spleef. Very odd game. It's like it's all over the place is what I'm gonna say. It could go either way. But otherwise she did like pretty solid. So yeah, and then we have Akuf, who I do know, but I don't know how good he is, like just overall in overall games. Because I know he does Hive, and he has played in like Hive tournaments. He's played in Hive Wildcard, but I don't know like individually how good he is. Although I think he's pretty like solid, just like all rounded, not like too strong in anything, but maybe like a bit weaker in like movement. But otherwise, he's like a bit of a wild card, especially being a newcomer in the event. So it could go either way for him. But yeah, now for games this team is strong at, it's leaning more towards movement. However, they can do very well in PvP. That is something that can happen. It really just depends on, like I say, PvP tends to be a bit more like all over the place. Like generally, just because you're good at PvP doesn't mean your team will do good in it, but they can succeed in it. But otherwise, I would try to avoid it if I were them. But yeah. Next up, we have the Green Griffins with Ian the Lad, Sharky Games, and the Alien Doctor. Now, this event sees the return of the GOAT, Sharky Games. We love Sharky Games here. He is the GOAT. Unfortunately, for his first event in Festive 23, it wasn't the best. It wasn't the worst either, though. It was just pretty okay. Just like a lot of the games I thought he would do good in, he didn't do as like Riff Race, which is unfortunate. But hopefully this time, my man has a better time, and he's actually playing wild card the day before this. So if you want to watch wild card, you can. But anyway, Sharky is like just like an all-rounded player, maybe a bit more towards movement, but otherwise just like generally all-rounded. He tends to have like a bit more like a stronger like knowledge gap or like game sense in games like overall. So while he's not like as strong in PvP and such, his game knowledge is like very strong, which can help a lot with games like Relic and Build Arena. So I definitely think he's got that going for him, and I definitely still think he can do a bit better than what he did in the movement games he played in Festive. So that's another thing going for him, especially Riff Race. That was unfortunate with the jump pads. And hopefully a better sleeve. That went very bad for him. But yeah. Then we have Ian, who had like a decent last event. Wasn't the strongest, but it wasn't the weakest. It could have been worse. That's all I'm going to say. I say that about a lot of things, though. But like I said, could be worse. So pretty solid, especially in Riff Race. Did have a very unfortunate mess up, which you probably saw from the footage. But anyway. Like I've said before, just like an overall all-rounder. Maybe a bit stronger in movement, but I would just generally say an all-rounder. Not too strong in PvP, not too strong in movement, not too strong in like team games. But he's not the weakest either. So yeah. And then we have Alien, who did pretty solid for his first event, which was his last event. And I'm curious to see if he'll bring that energy to this event. Obviously, he did very well with comms and stuff, and just like knowledge and like Build Arena and such. And that definitely helped. And he pretty much held his own in like PvP games as well. Maybe not strong, and same with movement. So he's just like pretty solid. Another like all rounder. So as far as this team wants to play for games, I generally think movement is a safer bet. Obviously, PvP is always risky, but movement's just way safer for them. And it'll definitely be way better for them. Also, Build Arena and Relic could go very well, although Ian hasn't played the new one, same with Sharky, so it could be a bit more rough. And this goes for like any other teams that I said Relic is good for. But I definitely think this team can do very well. As long as they can avoid PvP, they'll be golden. Or more specifically, Battle Royale, because that game can really mess you up. But yeah. Next up we have the Purple Penguins with Plushie33, Charlie07, and Gigi the Puppy. Now this is a very interesting team, as I feel like it could go very much either way for them. Honestly, she is a very strong player, but he did not have overall the best of time last event, specifically in PvP games and Spleef, because of course it's Spleef. What else do you expect? So he's going to be trying to redeem himself for that performance, at least in the PvP games, at least. Then we have Gigi, who did very well last event. Like Spleet, Rue went crazy, and in the other game, she held her own. Like overall, like she did pretty well. Maybe not good in movement, but like PvP was just solid all around. Yeah. And then we have Charlie, who didn't have like the best first event, but it wasn't the worst. And I definitely think he could easily improve from that performance. So this team just seems a bit up in the air, or at least from last performances. I definitely think this team is a bit more PvP oriented, although I could be wrong. But otherwise, I don't know what they would really play. They might be like a bit depending on how things go, they might be a bit more discouraged, especially Plushy after what happened to him last event. So I don't know. They just cover each other's like weaknesses, at least from last event, like pretty well. To the point where they're not too strong in any game, but they're just all around like okay. And that could be like very good for them. I could be wrong, but I can see them popping off in like any game, especially if Charlie does way better. This team can go very deep, but it's a bit more of a up in the air team. But yeah. And last but not least, we have the Orange Otters with Silent Whisper, Evident Fee, and Bears canceled. Now this is another very up in the air team. Obviously, Evident after Festa 23 has just been doing fairly well. A solid like leader slash and a strong like PvP player. So which has been very helpful. Unfortunately, he hasn't been able to make finale in those events, but he's still doing like individually very well, especially in more PvP oriented games. And then we have Bear, who had a very okay last event. It wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst. But she can definitely do better than what happened that event. So yeah, she's a bit more like all rounded in my opinion. Not too like generally strong in one area, which can be helpful at times. And then we have Silent, who for his first like not for fun team, I guess you can say. I don't know how to describe it. He did very well, especially with comms and just overall like game knowledge. That helped a lot with Relic Raiders and Build Arena. And the comms were just from him were just very good, which just helped in like every game. And comms matter a lot. And I don't know what he got individually, but he did do like pretty well. So he's definitely someone to watch out for. Now, as far as games this team will do good in, I feel like it's a bit more up in the air. Because like the last team, they kind of cover each other's weaknesses. Like, Evident, not as strong in team games, like Build Arena. But then someone like Silent is. So it's like they're canceling out each other's weaknesses to where they're not too strong in anything, but not too weak. Although, if I were to say a game they should try and avoid, I would definitely have them try and avoid BR because they're not necessarily a PvP team on the surface, and it could definitely be a bit more risky, but they can definitely still dominate it. So there is that. And yeah. And that is it for this MCBC 23 teams review. Sorry if it sounded a bit more repetitive at the end. That's because it's like 11 at night for me. Yeah, I know. Probably shouldn't be recording during this time, but it's alright. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I have no idea what the next upload will be, although it probably won't be in December. Most likely. It really depends. If it is, then it would be early December. But I don't think that's happening because I'm gonna be gone Thanksgiving break, so yeah, this possibly could be my last upload of the year, but I'm not 100% sure. It could go either way, but yeah. But anyway, hope you enjoyed, and bye-bye.